How's it going, folks? Tactard Ted. It is Friday the 26th of August, ending the work week on my way to my job. How's everybody doing today? So I get to smile and crack a grin a little bit when I hear military strategists suddenly telling you what I told you about a week ago. So there was much ado this week that the Ukrainians were switching to an active defense, a more active defense, meaning that they were going to keep some folks back from the line, and then when they saw where the Russians were pushing, they would push where they figured the Russians weren't. In other words, they would wait for the Russians to weaken up part of their line to make a push, and they're going to hit. So basically, it's a tit-for-tat idea that the Russians might push through to the left, but on the Ukrainian left, which would be the Russian right, that the Ukrainians would put pressure, either stalling out the Russians or making gains and compelling the Russians to pull back even farther. There's one problem with this, folks. It's the spider web I told you about last week. This is one reason the Russians aren't in any hurry. Time is not on the Ukrainian side. It's never been on the Ukrainian side. The Ukrainian army is still not as strong as it was on February 23rd of this year. They have lost a lot of equipment. The equipment that has made it to the battlefield has not made up the losses. The losses in manpower and trained manpower are not recoverable, not within years. It's interesting to watch some of these YouTube experts talk about, can the Russian army rebuild? The Russian army has not been sufficiently degraded to the point where it needs to be rebuilt yet. I know that's the big NATO Western wet dream, is that somehow we're going to use a bunch of Ukrainians to defeat Russia, and it's just not happening. Or to degrade Russia, to not really defeat. We're come on. I don't even think there's anybody in the Pentagon that is so dishonest that they actually believe that Ukraine has a chance. The best outcome for them is somehow a bunch of Ukrainians are going to die in order to degrade Russia to Russia is not going to be a threat for several years to the West or to the NATO agenda. So far, folks, that hasn't happened. In fact, the only thing we've managed to do is degrade stockpiles of NATO weapons because they have ran out of certain weapons. They're down below the levels they need in some European countries to actually defend themselves, because the great cash cow that is NATO, aka American militarism, because let's face it, we are the bankrollers of NATO. A lot of these countries hang out with their hand out, but they aren't paying their fair share. And when they don't pay their fair share, we pick up the slack. And we're seeing that with the weapons coming into Ukraine, that these countries have depleted their stockpiles, and a lot of the money that we say is Ukrainian aid, we're actually placing orders to the military-industrial complex to replace what we've already burned through for the Ukrainians. So a lot of that stuff is not going to Ukraine. It's just that simple. It's not really going to Ukraine, and we're not going to have that issue. But back to the spider web, folks. The Russians have put themselves in good positions along the front line. They are very conscious of their own casualties now. In the early days, the Russians did soak up a decent amount of casualties, nowhere near what the Ukrainians have lost. But then again, the Russians are the numerically inferior force on the battlefield. They were outnumbered about 4-1 when they started the operation, which is pretty suicidal for an attack, but it seems to be working for them. And one of the things they're doing now is their casualties daily are trickling down into very low numbers, and the Ukrainian casualties are skyrocketing. I won't go into the report earlier this week that was released, but back in April, there were a large number of Ukrainians killed just 2 months into the war, and the Ukrainian Casualties have only went up since then, folks. Let's be honest about that. The Russians have got a good position on their lines. They have good fire control. And the Ukrainians know that if they take certain towns, that it's over. Certain towns are going to give them a bigger foothold, bigger encirclements, and draw the Ukrainians to a point where they can no longer resist. So the Ukrainian attitude has been, and still is, to be honest, even though they went to an active defense, they've still got to main defensive areas in these towns, these cities. Unfortunately, they're sending troops in to reinforce where other troops have been degraded and lost their combat capability, meaning that they've dropped well below 50% strength because of attrition, because of casualties, because of deaths. And they'll send in a brigade, 3-4 days on the line, they're chewed up. And the big elephant in the room that nobody seems to want to talk about is mass desertions. Entire units leaving the battlefield saying, screw this, we're going home. Screw this, we had enough. You guys are hiding over here in the rear, we're here with you. That is a recurring problem. So there are several small villages that have seen 3 brigades in a week's time. One brigade comes in, gets whittled down, they pull out or desert, they send in another brigade to reinforce. That unit is attrited, and they have to pull out. Then they bring a 3rd brigade in. And this is the way this is going, folks. The Ukrainians basically are doing, I guess, what you could almost equate to the old Soviet human wave attacks. They're just going to keep throwing stuff against the Russian line. The Russians are doing probably the most offensive defense you could ever imagine. They're allowing the Ukrainians to come in to an area that they have fire control over and chewing them up. They are literally dismantling the combat capability of the Ukrainians. And I said earlier, time is not on their side. They are running out of ammunition. They did not get everything we sent them. Other countries have made giant commitments of what they're going to send them and haven't even bothered to deliver. The numbers are out there online, folks. You can find them real quickly of what countries have promised what and how much has been delivered. And the Ukrainians can't stand to lose these towns because tactically and strategically they're screwed if they lose these towns. So they're going to keep throwing in more troops, and the Russians are going to drive them off. They are going to inflict heavy casualties. They are going to kill a lot of them. And when these units withdraw, they're going to send in fresh troops. The Russians, their tank crews and their infantry don't have to really break much of a sweat because the artillery and the rocket forces are doing the most of the work. And you know, I don't want to fool you guys. I'm not saying this is easy. I wouldn't want to be an artillerist in the Russian army right now because you're going to be working your ass off. And what most people don't understand is once you fire, because you don't want to fall victim to counter battery fire like some of the HIMARS have on the Ukrainian side. Once you fire, you have to displace. You fire a fire mission or two, whatever, you shoot and scoot. You don't stay around. You don't wait for the enemy to get a fix on you and start dropping rounds on you. That's where that's what the artillery war is. And the Russians are still massing up. Still, the figures are that the Russians are using about 60,000 rounds a day, and I've heard reports that we use 60,000 rounds for Desert Storm. 60,000 rounds that entire conflict. And here the Russians are dumping that a day, and they're able to replenish. The Ukrainians aren't able to replenish. The NATO stockpiles that the leaders of the West have been pilfering to give to Ukraine, they're to the point where they can barely defend themselves if anything were to happen. I think a lot of people in NATO, and I think the Americans really need to have a good picture of what's going on. if we have given so much away to defend Ukraine and it's not enough, what does that say about the capability of the NATO bloc to defend itself in time of war? Basically, what I'm understanding, what you're telling me, what you're showing me, is that this is an untenable alliance. This is an alliance that can't defend itself, that can't maintain itself. And we're a member. We're the cash cow. We're the sow laying on the side with all the little European piggies suckling at our teats. And this ain't how this is supposed to be. This isn't how it's supposed to work. And I know I'm painting some really weird imagery here, but that is the fact of it. All these little greedy piglets want us to pay for their defense. And we thought we had such a solid block. Their supplies are going dry in 6 months of a war that they're not even fighting. Imagine if that was a fight on their doorstep. I think you folks need to wake up and think about this. And the Russians are taking their time. You know, the latest defense package we send, some of that stuff the Ukrainians won't have for 2 to 3 years. Oh, and we're going to send, what was it, 265 or 240 some thousand rounds of artillery. That's about a week of what the Russians are firing. So I'm not sure how that's supposed to make a huge dent in anything. And I can tell you this, I don't believe that this outcome that everybody's pretending we're going to have is going to happen. I just see daily that the idea of what might be left of Ukraine continues to get smaller. It's a foregone conclusion. They are going to complete a land bridge to Transnistria. Ukraine is about to become Europe's largest landlocked country once they're cut off from the Black Sea. I'll also remind you guys that the second largest army in Europe in January of this year was the Ukrainians. Not anymore. Not anymore. They've lost some of their best troops. They have no more trained troops. If you're a trained troop and you're still alive in Ukraine, chances are you're hiding behind the lines most of the time and not anywhere near the front. And I'm not saying that there aren't brave Ukrainians. They're brave. They're brave and they're dying. They're dying for Joe Biden. They're dying for NATO. They're dying for a treaty organization that would not allow them membership. I think that's another thing. Ukraine never deserved membership in NATO. Not with the corruption, not with their open discrimination in their country amongst ethnic minorities, gypsies, Russians, other folks. They never had a place in the EU. They've never had a place in NATO. And yet, we led them on. Our leaders led them on. John McCain led them on. Barack Obama led them on. Joe Biden led them on. I'll even say that Donald Trump should have maybe been a little more realistic with them about how much they had a place at the table. But we didn't. And the Ukrainians are between a rock and a hard place. The Pride's not going to let them surrender. The NATO money flowing into the pockets of Zelensky and all the other oligarchs in Ukraine and their offshore bank accounts, like Zelensky. He doesn't keep most of his money in Ukraine. He keeps his money elsewhere. The money and the Pride are going to keep these folks from surrendering. And they're not going to die. But they're going to let plenty of their countrymen die. And, you know, what's their answer to this? They have an enemies list. Some of the people on this list. The big Russophobe Henry Kissinger, who, you know, much to his credit, I agree with him a lot of how he felt about the Soviet Union. Sorry, that's just the way that is. I'm not a fan of communism, never been a fan of communism, can't be a fan of communism. There are a lot of things I agree with him on, some things I don't, and he's on a Ukrainian kill list. Daria Dugina daughter of the Russian philosopher, was on the kill list. And now on that kill list online, there is a website. They have the word in Ukrainian liquidated over top of her picture, along with other people that they have had murdered. And interesting enough, Roger Waters of Pink Floyd is on that kill list because he has said some things that the Ukrainians don't like. You know, unlike the United States, where we let celebrities say all sorts of outlandish shit and we're not allowed to get pissed. If you're a celebrity and you say something shitty about Ukraine, they'll put you on a kill list. And once again, that demonstrates how far away from our values, our mindset, and our way of life the Ukrainians are. I'll be honest, there are a lot of celebrities that say shit I don't care for, and I'll disagree with them. I've never once said that any of them should be killed. Jane Fonda, I really hate Jane Fonda. Hanoi Jane, don't care for her at all. Never advocated for her killing, because that's not who we are. If you can't win in the discussion of ideas, you know, that's like getting in an argument with somebody and they drop the F-bomb on you. You've won. When you say something and all they got is F you back, you've beat them. They know you beat them. They're angry, and you're done. I can debate Jane Fonda. Not a problem. Who knows? Jane Fonda might even beat me with my own words. I don't know. I just don't have much respect for the woman. But I've never advocated for her death. And I'm not going to advocate for the death of somebody I disagree with. You know, that's just the way it is. That's the way adults act. I'm so sick of the petulant children on the left in this country. And this might be why the left is really embracing Ukraine, because they are just petulant children who can't discuss anything on substance. They've had opportunities to straighten this out, and now they're paying because they didn't have the vision to straighten this out. They didn't have a vision to try to work with their neighbor. I think all of us in school, at least my generation, you got to get along with your neighbor. You got to get along with the guy next to you. You've got to try to get along. Let's all try to get along. Okay, yeah, cool. I took that to heart. I try to get along. There are a lot of people I don't like. There are people I don't like in my community. I get along with them. Why? I got to. Because that's the only way you can be an adult, is to get along. I don't go along to get along. I have positions that I'll stand, but I don't wander around bullying myself, calling people all sorts of things and wanting them to lose their jobs because I don't agree with them. And that's not the deal with the left, and the Ukrainians are even better because they want you dead. Roger Waters. I don't agree with a lot that Roger Waters has to say on some things, but the man is very well read and has some very decent opinions. I just can't imagine advocating killing someone because you disagree with them. You know, it blows my mind. It blows my mind. It shows the Nazi mentality, that fascist mentality. If I can't defeat your ideas, then I have to remove you from the gene pool. I mean, gee, isn't this something that we've tried to stand against? You know, we tried to stand against it with the Klansmen. We tried to stand against it with all these other radical groups. We just don't want to see people killing each other because of a disagreement, because of a skin color, because of a political leaning. You know, since the American Civil War, we've been able pretty much to escape large-scale bloodshed in this country. Now, yeah, we have our little riots from time to time. We have the bloody peaceful protests of the BLM. We have the riots of the peaceful protest in January 6th, where the only person killed was an unarmed woman, which I don't know why I have to keep repeating that, but it seems that nobody understands that. And here we are, folks. Here we are. The Russians are stagnant. The Russians can't move forward. No, the Russians are sitting happy and fat, letting the Ukrainians come to them to die. Letting the Ukrainians wash up against them and get wasted, because not that the Ukrainians are attacking, but the Ukrainians are trying to occupy positions that the Russians have fixed. They have them fixed. They know where everything is. They know where the bunkers are. They know where the trenches are. They have really good intelligence. They're not like Ukraine, who has to have the Brits or us giving them intel, giving them photos and satellite imagery and all that good things, so the Ukrainians can get more of their folks killed. And basically the Russians are like, hey, keep sending them till they send no more. And that's a very Russian attitude. I'll let you send as many as you want until you have no more to send. And when you have no more to send, then I can move forward. Everybody talks about how the Russians are careless with lives. And you can see plenty of that in history. World War I under the Tsar, you can see that the Russians took massive casualties. You can see World War II. The largest casualties of any country were the Soviet Union during the Second World War. I mean, there is a history of that. But right now, the Russians have evolved. They are to a point where they can spare their own people, and they're doing so. I tell you who's not being spared: the Ukrainians. The Russians aren't sparing the Ukrainians aren't sparing the Ukrainians, and the Americans aren't sparing the Ukrainians, nor are our other NATO allies like the UK. Boris Johnson, he went in there to have a little talk. Hey man, I'm a lame duck, but Zelensky, don't you dare think about negotiating with the Russians. Don't you even dare think about that, because there's still a lot of money on the table. I can still put a little bit out until I walk away. So don't you dare think about giving up, because there's a whole fortune of money, all this taxpayers' money that you can have, but all you have to do is hold out, don't surrender. Isn't that a shame, folks? I'll talk to you guys later. Bye.